You ever wonder what it takes to push a man too far? I mean, really push him to the edge, where logic gives way to instinct and silence turns into fire. Let me show you, because one morning, without warning, I looked out my window and saw bulldozers leveling the only place I'd ever called home. My wildflower garden, gone. My porch, splintered. My memories, crushed under steel treads. And the people who ordered it, they wore smiles and carried clipboards. The HOA, a name that sounds harmless like a polite neighborhood committee. But what they really are is a private government ruling without a badge, without elections, and without a conscience. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that buried deep beneath the soil of my land was something older, something stronger than their fake authority. A single, rusted valve, one they never saw. But I did, and when I turned it, the water stopped flowing. Not just to my creek, not just to the HOA lawn sprinklers. No, this water fed a 1,500 head sheep ranch just down the hill, owned by the HOA president's husband. You starting to see the picture now? They thought they had all the power. But power isn't about paperwork. Power is about who can turn the tap off when it matters most. So I ask you, what would you do if the system tried to erase you, brick by brick? Would you kneel and beg? Or would you reach for the lever and shut their world down? Stay with me. This story isn't about revenge. It's about the truth buried beneath polite lies. The truth about how far a man will go when you destroy his home, and what happens when you dig just a little deeper than they ever wanted you. 2. Because what I found under that porch didn't just give me leverage, it gave me a weapon. A legal, historical weapon forged by the settlers who built this land before HOAs even existed. And if you've ever felt powerless, overlooked, or controlled by people who smile while they ruin your life, you need to hear what happened next. This isn't just a story, it's a warning, and it starts with everything they destroyed. Ready? Let's go deeper. I built that house with my own hands. No contractors, no prefab blueprints. Just cedar beams, nails, and years of pent-up dreams that had nowhere else to go. The kind of dreams you can't buy with a mortgage only earned with scars and sweat. I wasn't looking to impress anyone. I wanted quiet, a garden to dig in, stars to fall asleep under, a place to finally breathe. After spending 15 years locked inside, government buildings reading weather data for people who never looked out a window, I chose Willowbrook because it was outside the HOA lines. Or so I thought. The deed was clear. My property sat just beyond their jurisdiction, till they moved the lines quietly, without public input. And suddenly, I was the newest member of a club I never signed up for. I started small. A letter about the unsightly garden, a warning about the wooden house. Then came the inspections, the fines, the threats, and finally, demolition. All over what? Paint color, building materials. Or was it something deeper, like the land itself? You see, I bought 20 acres. Most folks here own half an acre, maybe one. But mine had something different, a creek that ran year-round, feeding the lower basin. Nobody told me at first, but that stream was sacred to this neighborhood. It kept the HOA lawns green and, more importantly, kept 1,500 sheep alive down at the Whitmore Ranch. That's right, Maria Whitmore, HOA president. She sat on both sides of the fence, in charge of enforcing rules up here and benefiting from the water down below. The conflict wasn't about aesthetics. It was about control. Maria didn't want my flowers gone. She wanted my land. She wanted the water. And when I said no, she declared war. But what she didn't realize is that beneath my porch lay a forgotten relic of the original settlement. A castron valve tied to a set of 1893 water rights, legal, binding, untouchable. I didn't even know what it was at first, just an old wheel, half buried in the dirt. But when I traced it back through Records County maps, handwritten ledgers, I found the truth. That valve controlled everything, and it belonged to me. Maria thought she could break me, but she only woke something she couldn't control. The night after the demolition, I didn't sleep. I sat on the steps of what used to be my home, rain soaking through my clothes, staring at the iron valve buried beneath the porch. You ever feel it? Click inside your soul when the world crosses a line it can't uncross? When something inside you shifts, slow but final, and you realize there's no going back. That was me. All I had left was 20 acres of mud, a destroyed garden, and a secret no one else seemed to know. That valve wasn't just a relic, it was leverage. A relic with roots in law, older than the HOA, older than Willowbrook Estates, older than the ranches that now depended on the water. It controlled. I didn't want to use it, not out of fear, but because once I did, it would change everything. You don't just shut off someone's water and walk away. You light a fuse, and you wait. The next morning, I did what they never expected. I went. Quiet, no protests, no shouting. I filed a cease and desist, not just against the HOA, but against Maria personally. Attached to it were notarized copies of the 1893 deed, original water control records, and testimony from the county's clerk, all stamped, all sealed, all legal. I sent it by certified mail, hand-delivered a copy to Maria's front gate, and another to the sheep ranch down below. Then I waited, I watched, and in that stillness, the cracks started to show. I think it scared them, my silence, because when a man doesn't fight, doesn't scream, doesn't break down, they don't know what he's planning. That's when people start to panic. They try to spin a new story, control the damage, but Maria made her fatal mistake. She underestimated the land. She thought it was about fences and flowers. She didn't understand that in Texas, water is power, and the man who controls the valve controls the valley. The sheep ranch noticed first a subtle drop in pressure, a creek running thinner than usual, just a taste of what was possible, no warning, no announcement, just a glimpse of a future without control. I wasn't bluffing, I was proving a point. That valve, it wasn't a threat. It was a lesson, a reminder that the ground we stand on holds stories older than our petty rules, and when you disrespect the land, it has a way of remembering. 3 days passed, I didn't turn the valve again. I didn't need to. Word travels fast when animals start going thirsty. Tom Whitmore, the ranch owner, Maria's husband, came knocking. Not angry, not aggressive, just tired. He asked if I'd noticed anything unusual with the creek. I looked him in the eye and said, "Depends what you mean by unusual." That was the moment he knew. He didn't say it, but he knew. And I saw something in him I hadn't seen before. Doubt, not in me, in her. The woman pulling the strings had finally tugged too hard, and the whole damn web was trembling. By the end of the week, the whispers began. I saw HOA board members drive by slowly, looking at my new sign. Historical Water Control Point, EST, 1893. Just words on wood, but they hit like a hammer. Because those words meant there was something under this land they couldn't override, couldn't rewrite, couldn't bulldoze. That kind of history doesn't get erased, it gets enforced, and I was the enforcer now. Maria, though, she doubled down, filed another citation. Claimed I was creating a threatening atmosphere by posting unauthorized signage. She even said I was harassing the community. But what she didn't know was I had recordings, documents, neighbors who were finally ready to talk. I gave it all to the local press. I told them the full story, not just mine, but the lands, the forgotten water lines, the bulldozers, the permits that were never real. I handed them everything Maria never thought would surface, and when the story aired, it was like striking oil. Residents started questioning everything. Who gave Maria that power? How many rules were real? Why was she targeting me in the first place? And beneath all those questions was the truth I had learned the hard way, sometimes the only way. To wake a sleeping town is to shake the ground beneath it. Do you know what happens when power realizes it's being watched? It doesn't get quieter. It gets louder, desperate, reckless. And Maria, she went into overdrive. Within 48 hours of the news piece airing, she filed an emergency injunction, claiming I was threatening public safety. Public safety. Because of a sign, because I knew too much, because I wouldn't back down. She thought she could frame me as dangerous, unstable, a rogue element that needed to be handled. But the more she pressed, the more the mask slipped. People started seeing her for what she was, not a protector of community values, but a queen clinging to a crumbling throne. That morning I got a knock on my door, not from Maria, not from the HOA, but from Elizabeth, the same neighbor who once wouldn't meet my eye. She stood there, tears in her eyes, a pie in her hands, and something far heavier on her conscience. "I should have said something sooner," she whispered. I knew what she did to the last family that challenged her. She told me how Maria had systematically driven out anyone who questioned her authority. Fabricated citations, forced inspections, destroyed lives one fence post at a time. I wasn't the first, but I was the first to fight back and win ground. With Elizabeth's story, I now had more than documents. I had testimony. I had patterns. I had a case. I called a lawyer, a real one. The kind who didn't blink when I said century-old water rights and corrupt HOA enforcement. He told me something I'll never forget. You're not defending your house anymore. You're defending history. I gave the legal team everything, the land deed, the pipe photos, video of the bulldozers. And when they connected the dots, the picture that formed wasn't just damning, it was undeniable. Maria hadn't just stepped outside her authority, she had buried the law under a manicured lawn of lies. The town started stirring. Quiet phone calls, anonymous letters. Residents asking me, what happens if she comes for us next? I told them the truth, she already has. And unless we draw a line, not in sand, but in stone, she'll never stop. Here's the truth they don't want you to hear. Systems of control only work if you believe you're powerless. The moment you realize you're not, that's when it all begins to fall apart, and Maria, she built her empire on the illusion that no one would ever fight back. But I had the valve, I had the documents, I had the story, and more importantly, I had the people. I stood on the edge of my property that Friday morning, watching workers finish building the frame for a new community sign. Not one from the HOA, one we created ourselves. The words were simple: we are not property. Underneath it, a list of names families who'd lived here for decades, even those Maria had forced out. This wasn't just rebellion anymore, it was awakening. And then the calls started coming in. A reporter from Austin, another from Dallas, a podcast that covered government overreach. They wanted interviews, they wanted footage, they wanted the whole truth, and I gave it to them, unfiltered, unforgiving. I held up the photos of my bulldozed, garden-like war evidence, showed them the rusted valve that once fed the valley, told them how HOA greed wasn't just a local nuisance. It was a nationwide disease. It didn't take long for the dominoes to fall. The county council issued a moratorium on all HOA-related demolitions until further notice. State regulators began requesting HOA financials. And then the bombshell dropped. A former HOA treasurer leaked documents showing thousands in misallocated funds, landscaping expenses that never happened, security upgrades that were actually bonuses. Maria had been siphoning power, control, and money, all under the cloak of neighborhood harmony. But power never dies quietly. The night after that leak, someone tried to break into my tool shed. No theft, just a message, papers scattered, locks snapped. But I wasn't rattled, because I had installed cameras and I had the footage. The figure wasn't masked. It was someone from the board, one of Maria's most loyal enforcers. We handed it over to the sheriff, and that's when it all snapped. They say the most dangerous man is the one with nothing left to lose. But that's only half the truth. The real danger is the man who finds something worth fighting for, something sacred, something the system tried to erase. That's who I became. In the days that followed the break-in, the tide didn't just shift, it crashed. Neighbors, who had once watched me from behind curtains, now walked up to my porch with casseroles, handshakes, and stories of their own. Stories about how Maria had fined an elderly widow for wind chimes, how she forced a veteran to repaint his house 3 times because she didn't like the tone. This wasn't governance. It was control dressed up in paperwork, so we did. What they never expected, we organized. Every Friday night, 50 chairs lined the town square. People brought folding tables. Kids played tag between the legs of old lawn chairs. And one by one, folks stepped up to the mic. They spoke of loss, of injustice, of rules twisted into weapons. And when the speeches ended, we voted, not for vengeance, but for reform, for freedom. I wrote up a new charter, short, clear, and unbreakable. It eliminated arbitrary fines, made meetings public, and stripped the HOA president of unilateral power. No more backdoor decisions, no more bulldozers showing up at dawn. And most importantly, it acknowledged historical land rights, including the water valve buried under my porch. Some tried to stop us. One board member called it an illegal uprising. Another warned that the HOA could sue each homeowner into submission. But those threats had lost their teeth, because we were no longer isolated. We were a wall, and walls don't fall easily. The most powerful moment came when old Tom Whitmore, Maria's husband, took the stand. He didn't say much, just looked around at the faces he'd known for years and said, "I believed she was doing what was right. But now I see the damage, and I'm sorry." He stepped down, leaving silence in his wake. But it was the kind of silence that meant everything had changed. And by dawn the next day, we weren't the same town anymore. We weren't waiting to be rescued. We were rescuing ourselves. I knew change was real when Maria's name was removed from the HOA ledger. Quietly, without ceremony, just a signature, a timestamp, and a woman who once ruled through fear reduced to a line item in a spreadsheet. But her absence didn't mean the battle was over. Power, like water, always looks for a new place to flow. If we weren't careful, we'd trade one tyrant for another. So I stayed vigilant. Not because I liked conflict, but because I understood the cost of silence. We turned the old HOA office, that sterile bunker of bureaucracy, into a community hub. The first floor held legal clinics for homeowners who'd been fined into near bankruptcy. The second became a library filled with books on property, law, rights, and civil codes. Knowledge, I reminded them, isn't just power, it's armor. And for too long, they'd been walking into battle naked. The garden Maria once destroyed. It bloomed again, this time not alone. Dozens of neighbors brought their own tools, their own seeds. A woman named Joyce planted sunflowers in the exact spot where the bulldozer had first struck. "Let it be a reminder," she said, wiping sweat from her brow. I had meetings with state officials, not just about my land, but about the way HOAs across the region were being weaponized against homeowners. They were stunned by the documents I presented. Photos of destroyed property, audio recordings of threats, forged meeting minutes. One senator said, "I thought HOAs were supposed to protect communities." I looked him in the eye and replied, "So did we." Legislation began to stir. Small at first, proposals, debates, but the flame was lit. We weren't just fixing a neighborhood anymore, we were triggering a reckoning. And through it all, that valve beneath my porch remained untouched, protected, revered. Not because it held the power to starve a ranch, but because it symbolized something bigger. A truth buried for a century. A reminder that control doesn't always wear a badge or carry a gun. Sometimes it's hidden under wood and soil, waiting for the right hands to turn it. And I had turned it. Not just to defend my home, but to wake everyone else up. It was nearly a year to the day when I stood in front of what used to be the old sheep ranch. The same land that had once benefited from my stolen water. Dry now, parched, cracked in the July heat. 150 acres of silence where there used to be chaos, sheep bleating, generators humming, guards yelling across fields. Now nothing, just dust, and the echo of a mistake they never thought would cost them everything. I didn't take joy in the desolation. That's not the kind of man I am, but I did feel vindicated, because they had taken everything from me, my home, my dignity, my quiet life, and in the end, they were the ones who lost. Not because I fought harder, but because I knew something. They didn't. When your cause is just, you don't run out of fuel. You become the fire. The ranch owners tried to sue. Of course they did. They claimed I was operating an illegal blockade, that I was threatening agricultural supply lines, endangering livestock. But they had no case. My water rights were older than their fences, older than their livestock permits, older than the HOA charter itself. A century of documentation, all signed and sealed, protected me like steel armor. And then, one morning, an envelope arrived, certified, thick. It wasn't from lawyers. It was from the Department of Water Resources. Inside, a formal apology. They admitted that years ago, during a boundary reassessment, my water lines had been misinterpreted. A mistake, a bureaucratic error, but one that had led to a cascading abuse of power. They were offering compensation. Land credits, public acknowledgement. It felt hollow, too little, too late. But something in that envelope did matter. Attached was a request. They wanted my help to advise on new state guidelines to prevent abuse like this from ever happening again. They wanted the man they once ignored, to become a protector of others like him. And I said yes, because I knew what it meant to be unseen, and I wouldn't let it happen again. This wasn't just my story anymore. It had become a movement, a rising, a quiet revolution led not by force, but by people with roots too deep to dig up. I remember walking through the ruins of what used to be my home, the splintered wood, the dust-filled air, the echo of dreams they tried to erase. And now, I walk through a different kind of place, one rebuilt, not in bricks or boards, but in truth, in unity, in something they couldn't destroy. The garden behind my new home stretches wider than the last one. A stone path winds between beds of lavender, tomatoes, wild mint, and sunflowers. Every plant is a symbol of defiance, of healing, of home. Not just for me, but for every neighbor who once hid behind their blinds in fear. They don't hide anymore. They show up. We host monthly dinners now, not HOA meetings, real gatherings. We eat under the stars, talk about things that matter: land, family, legacy, no fines, no threats, just connection. People bring food, laughter, stories, and every so often, someone brings a question about their rights, their options, their future. And I answer, because now I know the valve beneath my porch. It's still there, untouched. It doesn't need to move anymore. Its message has already spread. All across the country, I've received letters from homeowners, ranchers, families, people who saw the story and realized they weren't crazy. They weren't alone. They had been gaslit by power, just like I had, until someone turned off the tap dot, and now it's your turn. If you're listening, if something in your gut has been telling you that things aren't right, that you've been pushed around, silenced, lied to, trust it. You're not imagining things. You've been living under rules designed to keep you small. But that ends the moment you know what they don't want you to know. Because the truth, it doesn't just set you free. It arms you. This channel is here, for that reason, to shine light into the shadows, to tell the stories they want buried, and to remind you that you are not powerless, you are not alone. And when you subscribe, when you share, when you speak up, you become part of something bigger than revenge. You become the storm they never saw coming. So if you believe in that, in truth, in justice, in never letting anyone demolish what you love without a fight, then stay with me. Let's keep digging. Let's keep building, because this is just the beginning.